The morning sun had just started to rise over the quiet neighborhood, painting the streets in soft shades of gold and orange. Birds chirped gently from the trees, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted from nearby homes. In the middle of all this calm, she was already up, moving with her usual quiet determination. She had a small routine, one she kept religiously every day. First, she fed her dog, a big, loyal companion who had been with her through everything. The dog wagged its tail furiously, as if understanding the importance of the morning ritual. It was more than just feeding. It was a moment of connection. She scratched behind its ears and it nuzzled her hand, a soft reminder that no matter how chaotic life could get, some things stayed steady. After feeding the dog, she went about her morning chores. She watered the plants by the window, checked the mailbox, and tidied up the small living room. Everything was neat and in its place, a reflection of the order she liked to keep around her. Life hadn't always been easy, and she had learned early on that being organized and prepared gave her a sense of control. Her neighborhood had its problems, but she had found a rhythm that made life feel manageable. Walking outside, she clipped the leash onto her dog's collar and started their usual morning walk. The streets were mostly empty, the calm before the day fully woke up. She waved to neighbors who were also out early, exchanging small smiles and nods. There was a sense of community here, the kind of neighborhood where people looked out for each other even quietly. Her dog sniffed around eagerly, clearly enjoying the freedom of being outside. It was moments like this that reminded her of how much she had built for herself, her home, her peace, and her sense of independence. Yet beneath the calm, there were always undercurrents of tension. Recently, she had noticed signs that the local gang had been around. Graffiti on walls, a few suspicious figures hanging near corners, and strange noises late at night. They were young men who thought they could intimidate anyone they wanted. She had no personal quarrel with them, yet she knew the kind of people they were, bullies who often targeted those who they assumed were weaker. She had seen it happen to others, neighbors whose homes were broken into or who had been harassed in the streets. It was the kind of fear that hung in the air but never fully touched her. Because she had learned to be alert, cautious, and most importantly, smart about her surroundings. Her dog tugged slightly on the leash, alerting her to movement at the end of the street. She looked and saw nothing at first, just a shadow that vanished quickly behind a tree. It made her frown. The dog growled softly, a deep, low sound that made heads turn. She knelt down, resting her hand on its head. "It's okay," she whispered, though even she felt a little tension creep in. There was something about the way the dog reacted that made her take notice. He was loyal, yes, but he was also protective in a way that had saved her more than once from trouble she hadn't even realized was coming. They continued their walk, moving through the familiar streets. There was a small park ahead where she usually let the dog off the leash for a few minutes to run and stretch. Today, though, she paused. There was a feeling in the air, subtle but unmistakable. Something wasn't right. She scanned the area carefully, noting the empty street, the silence, and the shadows cast by the buildings. Her instincts had never failed her, and right now they were telling her to be alert. As they approached her home again, she noticed the faintest trace of movement near her front gate. She stopped, narrowing her eyes. A figure darted behind the bushes, quick and silent. Her dog stiffened, ears pricked, ready for anything. She exhaled slowly. It could have been nothing, but experience had taught her that nothing often led to something if she wasn't careful. She adjusted the leash, keeping the dog close, and entered her house with a deliberate calm. Inside, she closed and locked every door, checked the windows, and made sure everything was secure. Her movements were methodical, precise, almost ritualistic. This was her safe space, and she intended to keep it that way. Sitting down for a brief moment with a cup of coffee, she glanced around her home. The walls held memories of years of hard work, photos of family and friends, keepsakes from travels, small mementos that made this house more than just a shelter. Her dog lay nearby, alert but calm, its eyes following her every movement. In moments like this, she felt a quiet pride. She had built her life carefully, with patience and care, and she wasn't about to let anyone take it from her. Despite her calm, she couldn't ignore the tension she had felt earlier. The neighborhood wasn't dangerous most of the time, but danger had a way of creeping in when least expected. She had heard rumors that the gang had been escalating their activities recently. They had become bolder, targeting homes without warning, taking advantage of what they assumed was weakness. But they didn't know her. They didn't know that her dog was not just a pet but a guardian, attuned to every sound and movement around them. They didn't know that she had spent years learning how to stay one step ahead, how to anticipate trouble before it came. The rest of the day passed in a quiet rhythm. She ran errands, returned home, and prepared a small dinner. The dog followed her everywhere, a shadow at her side, a constant reminder of loyalty and vigilance. She enjoyed simple moments, like watching the sunset from her window, feeling the cool breeze on her face. Life was peaceful when it could be, and she treasured it. Yet deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that the calm was temporary, that something was coming that would test her in ways she had not anticipated. By nightfall, the streets were darker, quieter. The air was cooler and the shadows longer. She double-checked the locks and security system, then settled into her usual evening routine. The dog lay at her feet, occasionally lifting its head to listen for sounds outside. Every creak of the house made her ears twitch, every faint noise caught her attention. She wasn't afraid, not really, but she was aware. Awareness was her shield, her preparation for the unexpected. As she got ready for bed, she couldn't help but think about the neighborhood, about the people who assumed they could intimidate or harm others without consequence. She thought about the gang, the rumors, the stories she had heard. And she made a quiet promise to herself. No one would take her peace, her home, or her dignity. She knew she had strength, and she knew her dog had strength. Together, they were ready for whatever might come next. She turned off the lights, leaving just a small lamp on near the living room, casting a warm glow. The dog curled up at the foot of the bed, alert even in sleep, breathing steady and calm. She lay down, eyes open for a moment longer, thinking about the day, the calm, and the subtle signs of tension. Outside, the night was still, almost deceptively quiet. But inside there was readiness, there was awareness, and there was a sense of unshakable calm that came from knowing she was prepared. For her, life had taught one clear lesson. Strength came not from fighting all the time, but from being prepared, from observing, and from having loyalty close by. That loyalty embodied in her dog had been tested before and had never failed. And she knew, even as she drifted off to sleep, that no one who underestimated her or her companion would ever walk away unscathed. The night seemed peaceful, yet the air held a quiet tension, a foreshadowing of events that would soon test her calm, her courage, and the unbreakable bond between her and the dog who never left her side. The next morning started much like any other. The sun filtered through the curtains, painting golden stripes across the wooden floor. She moved around her home with ease, her dog padding alongside her, tail wagging lightly. There was comfort in routine, a sense that life could remain normal if she stayed alert and careful. She fed the dog, tidied the kitchen, and made herself a cup of coffee, savoring the warmth and aroma. But she couldn't ignore the small unease that had settled in her chest the previous night. Even with the house locked and the dog always on guard, there was a feeling that the calm would not last. She had lived in this neighborhood long enough to know that danger often crept quietly, appearing when least expected. And some people, driven by arrogance and prejudice, assumed they could enter someone's life without consequence. Down the street, the gang had been gathering. They had heard rumors about her independence and the dog that seemed almost like a shadow following her everywhere. The stories fascinated them, but in their minds they dismissed them. They thought she was just another woman they could intimidate. She lived alone, they reasoned, and had no one else around. Their prejudice clouded their judgment. They didn't see strength, they only saw what they assumed was weakness. That morning, a few of them leaned against the walls of a nearby building, speaking in low voices. They laughed quietly, sharing half-baked plans to make an easy score. One of them had seen her leave for her morning walk and thought the timing was perfect. None of them noticed the dog lounging at the edge of the yard, alert eyes following every movement of the gang members. The dog didn't bark, but the posture was enough to show that nothing went unnoticed. Back at her home, she noticed something slightly off as she returned from errands. There were subtle signs, a shadow moving. Too quickly across the front window, the sound of something brushing against the gate. She paused and listened carefully. The dog immediately stiffened, ears pricked and body tense. That one glance told her everything she needed to know. Someone had been close, someone had been watching. Her mind worked methodically, considering every possibility. She wasn't afraid, not really, but she knew that being alert meant she could prevent any real danger. She double-checked the locks on the doors and windows, made sure the alarm system was active, and even set an extra camera pointing toward the side of the house. Every precaution mattered. She had learned through experience that people who underestimated her would regret it, and she intended to make sure no one had the chance. Later that afternoon, she noticed movement from inside the living room window. Two figures crouched low near the side of the house, trying to remain unseen. Her heart rate didn't spike, but her focus sharpened. She signaled subtly to the dog, who understood immediately. Without a sound, the dog moved toward the window, tail stiff and body ready. The figures froze when they noticed the dog, but their curiosity pushed them closer. They were confident, thinking a big dog alone meant she wouldn't be able to do much. She quietly moved through the house, grabbing her phone and keeping it in her hand. Every step was deliberate. She didn't panic, didn't shout, she observed. There was a strange satisfaction in seeing how the dog reacted. It was protective, loyal, and intelligent. She smiled faintly. They were making a mistake. The gang crept closer to the house, unaware of the camera perched on the side, recording every movement. They thought this was an opportunity to grab what they wanted and leave without being noticed. Their assumptions were based on stereotypes and arrogance. They assumed she would be an easy target, someone who could be intimidated into silence. But they didn't know her. They didn't know that she had spent years learning to anticipate danger, to stay one step ahead, and to rely on her most loyal companion for protection. Inside, she remained calm, observing the intruders. She called the police quietly, giving them the exact location and a brief description of what was happening. She knew calling the authorities would buy her time, but the real protection came from her dog. She watched as the figures crept toward the gate, unaware that every step was being recorded and observed. The dog crouched slightly, muscles coiled like a spring, eyes fixed on the intruders. The gang made a mistake that would cost them their confidence. One of them reached for the gate, thinking it was unlocked. The dog sprang forward in an instant, barking ferociously. The sound echoed across the street, loud and sharp. The figures stumbled back, startled by the speed and force of the attack. One tripped over a small rock, nearly falling flat on the pavement. Their assumptions about her, about the dog, about the ease of the task, they were all wrong. She stepped outside, phone in hand, keeping a safe distance. Her dog stayed close, growling, teeth bared, ready to protect without hesitation. The gang, caught off guard, hesitated. Their confidence wavered as they realized this was not a woman to be underestimated. They had thought it would be easy, a quick score that would leave them with money or valuables. Instead, they faced a vigilant protector, one who knew her surroundings and had the loyalty of a companion willing to defend her at all costs. The standoff didn't last long, but it was intense. The gang retreated, muttering curses under their breath, not daring to linger. Their plan had failed before it even began. She watched them disappear around the corner, the dog following every movement, ears alert. Once they were gone, she breathed a little easier but didn't relax completely. She knew this wasn't the end. People who were used to getting what they wanted didn't like being stopped, and the gang would likely reconsider their next move. She returned inside, securing the doors once again and reviewing the camera footage. Every detail of the encounter was recorded, every step and misstep of the intruders captured clearly. She sat down with the dog beside her, scratching behind its ears. "Good job," she whispered. The dog nudged her hand with its nose, a silent acknowledgement of the teamwork between them. It wasn't just protection. It was trust, loyalty, and understanding. Throughout the evening, she reflected on what had happened. There was no anger in her heart, only clarity. She had seen the danger approaching, had acted decisively, and had used every resource at her disposal to protect herself and her home. The neighborhood, usually calm, felt alive with tension, but she wasn't shaken. She had faced what others might have feared, and she had emerged prepared, aware, and unbroken. The police arrived later that night, taking statements and reviewing the footage. They were impressed with her calmness and her quick thinking. It was rare, they said, to find someone so composed under pressure. They promised to increase patrols in the area and to keep an eye out for the gang members who had been thwarted today. She thanked them quietly, not seeking praise, but appreciating the reassurance. The real victory was knowing that she had taken control of the situation, not panic or fear. As she settled into the night, she reflected on the lessons of the day. The gang had underestimated her, had assumed she would be easy to intimidate. But they had not accounted for her awareness, her preparation, or her dog's loyalty. They had learned that appearances could be deceiving, and that courage often comes quietly, without the need for confrontation until absolutely necessary. Her dog lay at her feet, tail slowly wagging as if proud of what had just transpired. She stroked its fur gently, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the bond they shared. It was more than protection. It was a partnership, built on trust and mutual understanding. Together they had defended their home, maintained their peace, and taught a lesson to those who thought strength could be judged by appearance or assumptions. The night was quiet again, but this time the calm felt earned. She knew there would be other challenges, other people who might underestimate her, but she was ready. She had strength, preparation, and loyalty on her side. The day had proven that even in the face of arrogance and prejudice, wisdom, courage, and vigilance could protect what mattered most. And as she drifted off to sleep, the dog curled up beside her, she felt a quiet confidence. The world outside might hold danger, but inside her home, with her loyal companion and her own steady resolve, she was untouchable. The gang had made a mistake today, but she knew they would not repeat it. They had underestimated the wrong woman, the one who was not only aware but ready and who had the most loyal ally by her side. The next evening, the neighborhood seemed quieter than usual. The sun had set hours ago, leaving behind long shadows that stretched across the streets. A cool breeze moved through the trees, rustling the leaves gently. Inside her home, she moved about with her usual calm precision, preparing a light dinner while her dog lay near the doorway, alert even in the dim light. The bond between them was strong, silent, but unbreakable. The dog always knew when something was wrong, and she trusted it completely. Despite the calm, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. The events from the day before replayed in her thoughts. The shadows, the movement near her gate, the gang members who had been watching her. They had underestimated her before, and she had no doubt they might try again. She had made sure her security system was functioning perfectly. The cameras were all in place, and her phone was ready in case she needed to call for help. Yet she also knew that sometimes preparation alone wasn't enough. She had to be ready for anything. As the night grew darker, she heard a faint noise outside, a soft scraping, almost like someone testing the edges of the gate. She froze for a moment, listening closely. Her dog perked up immediately, ears forward, tail stiff. That single glance from him was enough to tell her that trouble had come back to her doorstep. She didn't panic. Panic had never helped anyone in her position. Instead, she moved quietly to the living room window and peered through the blinds. Two figures were crouched low near the side of her house, attempting to remain unseen in the shadows. They were cautious, trying not to make a sound, but the dog had already noticed them. He let out a low growl, warning them that he was aware of their presence. The intruders hesitated for a moment, glancing around nervously. They hadn't expected resistance. They assumed she was alone, weak, and unprepared. They were wrong. She took a deep breath, considering her options carefully. She could call the police immediately, but she knew they might not arrive in time to prevent the break-in. Instead, she decided to stay alert and use her dog as the first line of defense. She whispered softly to him, and he understood instantly. His movements were silent and precise, trained by years of instinct and loyalty. The intruders moved closer to the gate, thinking it might be unlocked or that it would be easy to breach. One of them reached for the latch, but the moment his hand touched the metal, the dog sprang into action. He barked loudly and leaped forward with incredible speed, forcing the figure to stumble backward. Panic flashed in their eyes as they realized this was no ordinary dog. They had assumed a pet would only bark, not attack with such determination. She watched carefully, making sure she was safe inside the house. The dog continued to growl and bark, circling the intruders, making it impossible for them to get close. Their confidence was shattered, replaced by fear. They shouted to each other, trying to scare the dog away, but it didn't work. He was too focused, too loyal, and he knew his role perfectly. The gang quickly realized they had made a terrible mistake. They tried to retreat, but one of them tripped over a garden hose, falling hard onto the ground. The dog barked even louder, as if to say, "You will not come back here." She kept the front door locked, watching the entire scene unfold through the window. Her heart remained steady, but her mind was sharp, noting every movement, every misstep. After a tense few minutes, the intruders scrambled to get away. Their plan had completely failed, and they had no idea what they were up against. She could see the frustration on their faces as they ran down the street, muttering angrily and casting fearful glances back at her house. The dog followed their movement, eyes never leaving the retreating figures until they disappeared completely from sight. Only then did he relax slightly, returning to her side and sitting obediently, tail wagging just a little. She opened the door carefully, letting him inside while still keeping an eye on the street. Everything was quiet again, but she knew the danger wasn't over. People who were used to getting what they wanted often didn't give up easily. They might try again, but they would now think twice before underestimating her or her dog. She knelt down and scratched behind his ears, whispering softly, "You did amazing." The dog leaned into her hand, proud and protective, a silent hero in this little war that had been waged outside her home. Once the immediate threat had passed, she went around the house checking for any signs of damage. Everything was intact. Nothing had been stolen, nothing broken. The intruders had been too focused on escaping the dog to do any real harm. She felt a surge of relief, but also a quiet pride. She had anticipated danger, stayed calm and trusted her instincts, and her loyal companion had proved invaluable. Later that night, she reviewed the security footage. Every movement of the intruders had been recorded clearly, showing their hesitation, fear, and the moment they realized they had underestimated her. She made sure the files were safely stored, knowing that this evidence could be useful if needed. She wasn't vengeful. She just wanted to protect herself and make sure that anyone who came near her home knew that she was not someone to be underestimated. Her dog settled beside her as she sipped a glass of water, his head resting lightly against her leg. They had been through this together, and the bond between them had grown even stronger. It wasn't just about protection. It was about trust, loyalty, and understanding. He had followed her cues perfectly, reacted with precision, and reminded her that she was never truly alone. She thought about the intruders, wondering what they would tell each other after this encounter. They had assumed that because she was a woman living alone, she would be an easy target. They had ignored her awareness, her preparation, and her courage. Most importantly, they had completely misjudged her dog. Their arrogance had blinded them, and now they had learned a hard lesson. Even as the night grew deeper and the neighborhood sank into quiet, she remained vigilant. She checked the locks again, made sure the cameras were functioning, and ensured the alarm system was ready. It was not paranoia, it was awareness. Life had taught her that people who acted without conscience often returned, hoping for a second chance. She was ready for that too. The rest of the evening passed in a controlled rhythm. She prepared for bed, making sure the dog was comfortable and close by. He curled up beside her, eyes alert but relaxed, breathing steady. She lay down, reflecting on the day's events. She felt no fear, only clarity. She had faced danger, stayed calm, and emerged victorious without ever needing to confront the intruders directly. Her dog had done his part and she had done hers. Together they were stronger than any threat that could come to their doorstep. She thought about her neighborhood, about the small community that looked out for each other quietly. They would hear the story of tonight eventually, how a woman and her dog had stood their ground against those who underestimated them. But she didn't seek recognition. She cared about safety, respect, and the knowledge that she had acted wisely. That was enough. As she finally drifted off to sleep, she felt a sense of calm that was hard-earned but real. Outside, the night was still, shadows moving gently with the wind. Inside, there was warmth, trust, and a deep understanding that no one could take away. The intruders had learned that they had underestimated the wrong woman. She was alert, prepared, and protected, not just by locks or cameras, but by the unwavering loyalty of a companion who would not let anyone threaten her peace. The night passed quietly, but the lessons were clear. Courage wasn't about aggression. It was about awareness, preparation, and trusting the instincts of both oneself and those who are loyal to you. Strength didn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it came from the quiet confidence of knowing that you were ready, that you had allies, and that no one could surprise you unprepared. By morning, the streets would seem calm again, the sun rising gently over the neighborhood, painting the houses in soft gold. She would step outside for her morning walk, her dog by her side, knowing that together they had faced danger and won. And anyone who had watched from the shadows would think twice before ever underestimating her again. The morning after the attempted break-in, the neighborhood felt different. The air was crisp, the sun shining a little brighter than usual. But there was also a quiet tension lingering, like the kind of unease that comes after something dangerous almost happens. She woke early, as she always did, and began her morning routine. Her dog followed her closely, sensing that something had shifted. He had been vigilant all night, and his instincts were still sharp. She fed him, carefully observing his behavior. He ate quickly but kept looking toward the door and windows, alert and protective. She smiled softly at him, appreciating the unwavering loyalty he showed every day. This bond between them was not just companionship, it was trust, understanding, and mutual respect. The events from the night before had strengthened that bond even further. Together they had faced danger and had come out unscathed. After breakfast, she sat down with her laptop and started reviewing the security footage again. She watched the intruder's movements in slow motion, noticing every hesitation, every misstep, and every moment of panic. She made mental notes, identifying them as best she could from their appearance, their clothing, and the way they moved. This wasn't about revenge. It was about safety. She wanted to ensure that if they ever returned, she would be prepared, and the authorities would have clear evidence of their actions. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was a neighbor checking in, asking if she was okay. She explained briefly what had happened, keeping her voice calm but firm. The neighbor expressed relief that she and her dog were safe, and mentioned that others in the neighborhood had noticed suspicious activity over the past few days. She listened patiently, exchanging a few words of encouragement and advice, reminding them to stay alert. It felt good to know that people cared, even quietly, and that there was a sense of community looking out for one another. By mid-morning, she decided to take a walk with her dog. The streets were quieter than usual, with fewer people out and about. She noticed more cautious glances from neighbors, some curious, some worried. As she passed a corner store, the clerk gave her a small nod and whispered a thank you, hinting that he had heard about her dog's protective actions the night before. A small smile formed on her face. She didn't seek recognition, but it was nice to see that others appreciated her courage and vigilance. Later, she returned home and prepared to contact the authorities formally. She had already called the police the night of the attempted break-in, but now she wanted to ensure that a proper report was filed. She documented everything: times, movements, the way the intruders had approached, and how her dog had reacted. She compiled screenshots from the security footage, noting details that could help the police identify the gang members. Her approach was methodical, careful, and calm, reflecting her personality and the way she handled challenges in life. The police arrived mid-afternoon to review her documentation. They watched the footage with interest, impressed by her attention to detail and the dog's protective instincts. They asked a few questions about the intruders, and she answered them clearly, calmly, without exaggeration. Her demeanor conveyed confidence, strength, and awareness. The officers assured her that they would increase patrols in the area and keep an eye out for the gang members. She thanked them, knowing that while the police could help, the real protection came from her vigilance and the loyalty of her dog. After the police left, she reflected on the situation. She realized that the attempted break-in had not just been a threat. It had been a test of her awareness, preparation, and courage. She felt proud, not because of fearlessness, but because she had acted wisely, anticipated danger, and maintained control. Her dog had played a crucial role, demonstrating that loyalty and intelligence could be as powerful as any security system. Throughout the afternoon, she began talking quietly with a few trusted neighbors, offering advice on safety and awareness. She suggested practical steps: checking locks, keeping lights on, being observant, and shared her experience without fear or dramatization. The neighbors listened attentively, some nodding, some taking notes. It became clear that her calm and practical approach inspired them, showing that courage wasn't about confrontation but about preparation and vigilance. By evening, word had spread quietly through the neighborhood about the attempted break-in and how she and her dog had handled it. People admired her composure and the bond she shared with her loyal companion. Her story became a subtle lesson for the community. Appearances could be deceiving, and strength often came quietly in awareness, preparation, and the ability to act decisively when needed. She spent the evening with her dog resting beside her, watching the sunset through the living room window. She reflected on how quickly things could change and how important it was to remain calm and prepared. Life had a way of testing people in unexpected ways, and the events of the past night had reminded her that vigilance and loyalty were invaluable. Her dog had proven that trust could be stronger than fear and that preparation could prevent disaster. As night fell, she checked the locks and security system one more time, making sure everything was secure. She felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had acted wisely and decisively. She was ready for whatever might come next, whether it was the gang returning or any other unexpected challenge. The night was calm, almost serene, but she remained alert. Her dog, ever attentive, stayed close by, a constant reminder that she was never alone. Sleep came slowly, not because of fear, but because her mind remained sharp, reviewing the events and planning for any future risks. She had learned that preparation was as important as courage, and loyalty, whether from people or a devoted animal, was a source of strength that could not be underestimated. Her dog's presence, unwavering and alert, was a comforting reminder that she was protected in ways beyond locks or alarms. By the next morning, the neighborhood had settled into its usual rhythm. Children played quietly outside, neighbors went about their routines, and the street seemed peaceful. Yet she knew that peace was often fragile and vigilance was ongoing. She walked her dog through the familiar streets, greeting neighbors and maintaining awareness of everything around her. The events of the previous night were still fresh in her mind, but she carried herself with confidence and calm. Throughout the day, she continued to check on the neighborhood, discreetly ensuring that no suspicious activity went unnoticed. She offered small reminders to neighbors about safety, reinforcing the sense of community responsibility. Her actions were quiet but impactful, showing that courage and awareness could inspire others without needing recognition or attention. Her dog stayed close, alert and protective, a silent guardian who had proven his loyalty. Together, they had faced danger, maintained control, and demonstrated that even in the face of intimidation, preparation and courage could prevail. She knew that the gang had been forced to reconsider their assumptions, and that her example would remain a quiet warning to anyone who underestimated her. As the sun set once more, she sat in her living room, her dog at her side, reflecting on the lessons learned. She realized that strength came in many forms, not just physical but mental, emotional, and relational. Her bond with her dog, built on trust and loyalty, was one of the most powerful strengths she had. And she knew that with vigilance, awareness, and preparation, she could face whatever challenges life placed in her path. The night passed quietly, but the lessons were clear. Courage was not about confrontation or aggression. It was about awareness, preparation, and trusting those who were loyal to you. Strength could be quiet, subtle, and deeply effective, and loyalty, whether from a trusted companion or a supportive community, was a force that could protect, guide, and empower. By the end of Part 4, she had not only defended her home, but had inspired her neighbors and strengthened her own confidence. The attempted break-in had become more than a threat. It was a lesson in courage, preparation, and the unbreakable bond between her and her dog. She had proven that appearances could be deceiving, that strength often came quietly, and that loyalty and awareness could overcome fear and intimidation. The days after the attempted break-in passed with a quiet tension lingering in the neighborhood. While most people went about their routines, there was a subtle awareness that something had shifted. She moved through her own days with the same calm precision she always had, but now there was a sense of quiet empowerment in the way she carried herself. Her dog, loyal as ever, followed her closely, sensing the changes in the environment and her mood. Together they were a team, prepared for anything that might come their way. She spent her mornings as usual, feeding the dog, tidying her home, and checking her security systems. Each time she looked through the surveillance footage from the night of the break-in, she noticed new details: the hesitation of the intruders, the small mistakes they made, the moments when her dog's alertness forced them to retreat. It was clear to her that preparation and vigilance had prevented what could have been a serious threat, and it reminded her how important it was to stay aware, even when things seemed calm. One morning, she decided to go a step further. She contacted the local authorities again, providing them with all the evidence she had collected, including the detailed security footage and notes on the intruders' behavior. She wanted to ensure that these individuals could be held accountable, and that her neighborhood would be safer as a result. The police assured her they would investigate and promised to increase patrols, keeping a closer watch on the area. She felt reassured but knew that the real protection came from her vigilance and the loyalty of her companion. The neighborhood began to notice her proactive approach. A few neighbors approached her quietly, asking for advice on how to protect their homes. She offered simple, practical tips, checking locks, being aware of unusual activity, and trusting instincts. Her words were calm, not dramatic, and they carried a sense of authority because she had experienced what she spoke about firsthand. People began to see her not only as a neighbor but as a quiet pillar of strength in the community. Meanwhile, the gang that had attempted the break-in faced the consequences of underestimating her. Law enforcement identified the individuals based on the evidence she had provided, and they were brought in for questioning. The intruders had assumed they could act without consequence, but now they realized how wrong they were. Their arrogance had led them into a situation they could not control, and the experience would serve as a lesson for anyone who thought intimidation could succeed against someone prepared and aware. Life slowly began to return to normal, but there was a noticeable change in the community. The neighborhood had a renewed sense of unity, inspired by her calm courage and preparedness. People spoke quietly about the events, admiring how she had handled the situation with intelligence, bravery, and loyalty. She never sought attention or praise, but her actions spoke volumes. She had demonstrated that strength was not always loud or aggressive. It could be quiet, strategic, and unwavering. Her days continued with their usual rhythm, but there was now a sense of confidence in her steps. She walked her dog each morning and evening, observing the neighborhood, greeting neighbors, and maintaining her watchful awareness. The bond between her and her dog had deepened even further. He was more than a pet. He was a guardian, a loyal companion, and a reminder that trust and loyalty could be powerful forces in the world. One afternoon, she decided to take some time for herself. She sat on her porch sipping a cup of tea while her dog lay beside her, ears twitching occasionally as he listened for sounds in the distance. The sun cast a warm glow across the neighborhood, and for a moment everything felt peaceful. But she remained alert, understanding that peace was fragile and could be disrupted at any time. Her awareness was not fear, it was empowerment. She knew she had the tools, the instincts, and the loyal companion necessary to maintain her safety and her dignity. As the days passed, the police completed their investigation and took action against the gang members. They were charged for attempted burglary and intimidation, their arrogance having finally caught up with them. The community felt a sense of relief and justice, knowing that the individuals who had threatened their peace were being held accountable. She felt satisfaction, not from vengeance, but from knowing that she had played a part in protecting her home and neighborhood, and in ensuring that justice was served. The neighborhood began to speak of her in quiet admiration, not in boastful tones, but with respect for her calm courage, her intelligence, and the loyalty she shared with her dog. Parents spoke to their children about awareness and preparedness, using her example as a lesson in how to act wisely when faced with unexpected danger. It was clear that her actions had left a lasting impression on those around her. One evening, she walked through the neighborhood, dog by her side, noticing subtle changes. People smiled more openly, streets felt safer, and there was a sense of solidarity that hadn't been there before. She realized that her calm response and preparedness